This is a Step Beyond the Fire podcast. My name is Cully. I'm a land manager and a wildlife biologist here in my home state of Florida. I invite you to join me on a journey as I seek to document the little-known stories told by those who use fire for the benefit of the land, also known as prescribed fire. So come on, let's head into the field and meet the people where the flame ends and new life begins. Welcome back to A Step Beyond the Fire. Once again, I am your host, Cully, and we are here in beautiful Alachua County today. And I'm with a special friend and an even better mentor named Jeff McGrady. He is a retired regional biologist, having worked for the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission for 37 years. His experiences range from on-the-ground wildlife management to overseeing the wildlife management area system, which encompasses many thousands of acres of environmentally significant lands in Central Florida, all of which have active prescribed fire programs. Really happy to be here with you today, Jeff. The sun is setting. We're sitting under these trees, having just a really calm, relaxing time. We're even sitting out here by your fire pit. So thanks, Jeff.
Good evening. Glad to be here. My favorite place to sit, just looking up at the short leaf pines in the yard, which we didn't have in Central Florida.
Yeah,
it didn't get that big.
we've got short leaf pines here. What else have we got growing here?
Loblolly.
We got some loblollies. Lots of magnolias over there too.
Hickories.
Yeah, it's a beautiful property here, and I appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me because, you know, you and I worked together in the past, and I thought you could provide some great value to this conversation because of your experiences, not only in bigger picture conservation work, but also having been involved with active prescribed fire programs. There's a lot to talk about there. So the first thing I wanted to do is ask you, what does a regional biologist do? I think that's a good place to start, to help folks understand what it was that you were doing during that time.
Well, I think in the Fish and Wildlife Commission, the regional biologist for the management area system is sort of the nexus between the region, you know, comprised of all the management areas and all those personnel, and Tallahassee staff. But basically, you're the person that's driving the bus in the region to get, you know, take care of all the supervisory responsibilities, all the fiscal responsibilities, keep the budget on track and focused on the programs, and basically just keep everything running. Bring the budget in on time to zero.
Yes, I remember that. So
I bet you do.
So as a caveat to this, so Jeff hired me to work within this whole Fish and Wildlife Commission, the supervisory role. So I was what would be called a district manager or a district biologist is when I started working in administration, which is sort of a step above the field, because a lot of the field biologists were in remote locations doing their thing, everything from wildlife surveys to active land management, and then there's the administration part, which kind of ties everything together on that level, that's handling the money, handling all of the roles and responsibilities of supervisory work, all those good things. So I learned a lot from Jeff in a fairly short amount of time. I'd say it was about 3 years or so. And I had a lot of fun experiences with that. It was a tough role to really get, because I'd never supervised people before. And I felt that you had this great way of, you had a lot of positive impact on people. And you taught me a lot about important things, those skill sets that you just can't get when you're working out in the field, you know, like having empathy for people.
They don't have any courses at UF on
right.
supervisors in the wildlife program.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So there was a lot of that at the beginning where I was kind of stressed out when I became a supervisor for the very first time, because I was figuring out how to manage the money and how to manage all of the emails and assignments and all these things coming in. So, but taking a step back from all of that, so that's how I know you, Jeff, through this this life experience we had working together in Fish and Wildlife Commission, just for everyone to know. But I want to get into the next part of this, which is your life trajectory. So how did you become a regional biologist? What led to that?
Well, I started with the commission in 81 as a wildlife, what's now called a wildlife technician. You know, the guys on the ground that are like keeping all the equipment running and stuff like that. I was doing that down in the Big Cypress Wildlife Management Area, so that was just, to me, it was just a blast because there was no responsibilities other than that, and I got to interact with. Back then, they started the Panther program back in '81, and back then that was the only place they knew where there was like a panther or two. So I got to assist with programs like that. Back then, they were tracking them with fixed wing planes, so I would occasionally fly and track the ones that had radio collared, deal with nuisance bears, and just getting out of college, young kid, being in that environment in 500,000 wild acres like that. It was great hunting and fishing opportunities, especially fishing opportunities.
You're still a fisherman.
Yeah.
Still an active fisherman these days, huh?
Yeah, it's sort of an inverse curse there, but anyway, started out a menial but great. I wouldn't call it menial. It's just it was just an entry level sort of job doing that, and then I went to a biological sciences 1, 2, 3, 4, and then up to a regional biologist. But and so some of that was in the wildlife management area system on areas that we don't even have anymore. We used to have a Likes Brothers Fish Eating Creek wildlife management area down at Palmdale, an IMC management area in the mines for duck hunting, and did a few things like that. And then as I moved up, I moved over to the Bureau of Wildlife Resources, which doesn't exist now, but that was probably more or equally fun than my earliest years, because back then the commission wasn't as diversified. I mean, the commission is an extremely diversified organization now, but back then, at least in the wildlife realm, there was a Bureau of Wildlife Management that handled the wildlife management area system, and there was a Bureau of Wildlife Resources that handled anything that didn't occur on the management area system. And now that has dissolved and that's everything else you see in the commission with all the other wildlife species. But back then there was like 2 people in the region that handled all that stuff.
So your responsibilities back then were more diversified, or more species that you were working with, a wider
species specific. The commission didn't have a lot of budget back then, and so we're budget poor and personnel poor. So I assisted for the region. I assisted the waterfowl management program, the bear management program. There was a small game program. All these programmatic things where there was 1 or 2 people in Tallahassee and responsible for that program, and then they needed help in the regions to actually implement the activities. So, I was banding wood ducks and model ducks, catching them on airboats all around Central Florida.
I hear you're pretty good on an airboat.
That's the one thing I can be proud of. That's the one skill I can say, yeah, I was probably pretty good at that. Everything else, not so much.
Not so easy to run those airboats, man. That's especially at nighttime.
Yeah, it's amazing I didn't kill myself, because I spent just summers for about 10 years, just summers in on the airboat, Monday to Thursday doing alligator surveys in May. Just pretty much the month of May was just doing alligator surveys, and then jump right into banding waterfowl, and then jump into alligator egg collections and stuff like that. So yeah, throughout all of that, it's a wonder I didn't kill myself. But for those years, I was doing just really fun field related stuff like that, really hardcore field related stuff. I was doing the deer management program, so I was dealing with 500,000 acres of private landowners, helping them manage their deer populations. I handled the deer depredation program, the bear nuisance bear program. I was catching nuisance crocodiles and going out on any depredation complaints that might have been like a panther or something like that, and doing dove call counts and fur bear surveys, and just anything that wasn't on management area, that was on us to do it. So it was just like nonstop stuff like that. Of course, we handled all the nuisance animal complaints too. That was a fun spot in my career. And then the regional biologist retired, and they asked me to fill that position. And I told them to go to hell about 3 times, and I finally took it. Nobody wants to be a regional biologist.
Then all the fun was over after that.
Yeah, I went from supervising no one with a budget of $5,000 to supervising about 50 people with a $5 million budget. And,
wow, that might have been a little stressful.
That was like you experienced. Had no supervisory responsibility, and didn't know how to manage a large budget like that. And it just about killed me. It was a steep learning curve there.
Yeah, a really tough learning curve.
So anyway, that's how I got to be a regional biologist.
So there's a lot there. Was there any memory of any of those jobs that stands out in your mind that was your most favorite one of all, that you enjoyed the most, or was it kind of a little bit of everything?
I think just when I was a resources biologist and just doing all of the really, I had pretty much singular responsibility for having a certain period of time of just banning as many ducks as I could ban, being in the gator management program. I had X number of lakes to survey within a window. Those are just great goals to have. It's just you and your equipment and getting that done. And that was for a wildlife biologist. That's just the nuts for me. That was it.
Speaking of goal setting, goals are a part of our everyday life, and I learned a lot from you about goal setting. How did you use goal setting as another tool in your toolbox, especially on the administrative side, once you transitioned into management?
Well, in the wildlife management area system, in the Fish and Wildlife Commission, we have a planning section. And so I'm sure you're familiar with going to the planning meetings where we'd be developing a wildlife management plan.
Well, let's talk about that real quick. So the management plans set the policy and direction for how you're going to manage an area, both currently and usually over a 10-year period.
Right.
And that's it in a nutshell.
Right. It's legislatively mandated, and part of that is to have some public input and have the public have a say in how we're going to manage an area.
So you did a lot of those. over the years.
I did a lot of those, Cully.
A lot of those over the years, some of which I got to be a part of.
Yeah, and so that helps you that helps you develop a mindset of whenever you're managing an area, what is the goal? Is there an overarching goal? And then what are your objectives to achieve that goal? And then what are your strategies to achieve your objectives? And when you start tearing things apart like that and putting them in the right boxes and figuring out where you're going, you can use that process for a lot of different applications.
Process is a word that I'm afraid I overuse it from time to time, and my listeners have probably noticed that a lot of what management, a lot of active management is a process. It's never a one and done thing. Management, in my experience, has been this, it really is a process. It's never a one and done thing. It's never point A to point B. It's always, once you get to point B, then you're shifting. Maybe you shift your focus a little bit or set your goals and objectives based on that. So I learned from you about that too. And more specifically in my day-to-day job, I find it to be a great tool to demonstrate to the public exactly what you're doing. If you have abundantly clear goals and objectives, then nobody can really question. They can ask you questions about what you're doing, about, maybe why you're doing it. And that opens the door for good communication.
Yeah, with land management, it's easy to get off track and not be heading in the right direction. And that's part of getting back to what a regional biologist is making sure for each area you're headed in the right direction and you got the budget and personnel to do that. We developed the Wildlife Conservation Prioritization and Recovery Program. So that was another
WCPR,
big,
lots of good acronyms.
I'm sure you remember that. That was another really good program that helped crystallize. You have these imperiled species on your property, and you have this much habitat to manage them, and you either have enough or you don't, or it just helped you crystallize. Yes, these are your important goals. You have scrub jays, you have manageable habitat for them, and you need to do this to your habitat.
And having such a wide diversity of areas, your areas of responsibility stretch from Hernando County in the north all the way down to Lee County in the south and encompassed many hundreds of thousands of acres. So each natural area had its own specific set of needs, locally important wildlife species that had very specific management actions that were needed to benefit those species.
Right.
And that was sort of guided. So we talk about heading in the right direction. That's what this is getting at, is that being able to work with 52 or 53 people, I think is the last I remember.
Right.
Being able to work with all these folks and get them going in the right direction so that they could take relevant and applicable information. They could put fire on the ground. They could do the roller chopping. They could do timber harvesting. They could do invasive plant work. It also led to the habitat management plans, which I am implementing in my small group now, and it works great because you sit down one time a year, you say, okay, we want to burn this unit, we want to burn that one, we got 285 acres this year we want to do 75 acres of invasive plant treatments. We want to do some hardwood removals here. We want to, and then you get it all on paper, and then that sets everything in line for the year. So then you make your decisions accordingly. So there's sort of this finer scale goals for the year, and then there's these bigger set of goals, which are the 10-year management plan.
Right.
A lot of moving parts. A lot of moving parts there.
There is, and there's a lot of. Sometimes there's units that just don't want to be what you think they ought to be. Part of that planning process was looking at every management unit and seeing what it historically used to be, and then trying to manage it back to that community type. And we had areas that on an area in Hernando County, Big Pine, little bitty area, but it had a virgin longleaf stand on it.
Wow, which is what, 500 years, several hundred years old?
The trees there were like these shortleaf pines we're standing under right now. It's just an incredibly impressive longleaf stand. Not big, but and so we were trying to manage that longleaf stand, and there hadn't been any reproduction there in decades and decades and decades. So all it was a mature longleaf stand. When they all fell over, that was basically the end of the game. But bless our hearts, we kept trying to manage that longleaf stand, and there was just dense oak understory, and the more we messed with it, the denser it got. And so we chopped it, and we burned it, and we chopped it, and we burned it, and we shredded it and burned it, and we went in and removed all the lighter wood off the ground because it was too much smoke in that area to get a burn off. I mean, we managed it as hard as we could manage it. And some units, one of the biologists finally took me out there and said, look, this is, we've done all this work here, and what's coming back is magnolias. I really don't think this thing wants to be a pine community. And I finally succumbed. I'm like, okay, let's just back off here a little bit. But I mean, that's back to the goal setting. If you can spend we put a lot of resources into trying to manage that area, towards, virgin pine stand. I mean, to what end? If when they all die in the next whatever number of years, that'll be the end of it. And so, what's your goal there?
A moving target, I suppose.
Yeah. And we had an area down Hickey Creek down in Lee County that was up against the canal. They dug a deep canal on the western side of it, and so it was historically flat woods, and it was, that basically dropped the water table down until it turned into a scrub community.
Wow. And, which is typically, so our listeners know, a scrub community is a sandy, well-drained soils, and different types of species will grow in a scrub community rather than mesic flatwoods community.
Yeah.
So that happened.
And
wow.
So, I mean, we had a razor-sharp biologist there that knew that was a good thing because we had scrub jays there, but we didn't have a very big footprint to manage them on. But, if we could take that historic pine flatwoods community and manage it towards scrub, that would increase our footprint for scrub jay habitat. But if we just listened to the data and looked at the historical photographs and said this was a pine flatwoods community, we could have been off, just spinning out doing something that's really wasn't pertinent to our goals.
So sometimes things like that will happen where there's an unexpected, and then it ends up being a better thing in the long run. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you worked with a lot of interesting characters over the years, I'm sure, having been involved in the whole administration side of things. There's a lot of people that come and go through state agencies. Fish and Wildlife Commission is no exception to that. What is an insult that you received that you are most proud of during that time? I know there were several over the years.
There's plenty that I'm not proud of. I guess I've been accused of being too intense.
Too intense.
You could probably answer that better than I can.
I've seen the intensity. I've seen the intensity.
I probably could have been a better supervisor because I don't focus on the fluffy stuff. I just like,
Well, but you're
I'm
direct.
focused on the work aspects.
Yeah, I would say you're direct, but in a great way that that helps you focus on the issue at hand. They don't teach you that stuff when you go through when you get your wildlife degree. They don't teach you about managing people. It's just one of those things that you really have to work on your own.
Yeah, but when you're supervising a few people, you can afford to be a little more lenient, I guess. But the more people you supervise, the more strict you have to be, I guess, because you don't.
You have to be that way.
You deal with a lot of characters, but you also deal with a lot of people that probably don't need to be working for your agency, and you know, the wildlife area biologists that are supervising them just aren't. They have to deal with them in an office day to day, and so they're just not going to be as tough on them as you need to be.
A lot of quirky scientist types.
Yeah,
too.
Those types.
A lot of those.
But somebody's got to do the hard work of personnel management and think of what you're doing is refining that personnel tool and getting the right people in the right places. And sometimes that involves getting rid of folks.
I remember another lesson you taught me, and I think the world needs to hear this one. It's about the 3 legs of the stool. I still have it in my notes, by the way. It's in my files. I refer to it from time to time. But can you talk a little bit about the 3 legs of the stool?
Well, I've been retired for 3 years. So
I know.
I'm not sure I can even dredge up the 3 legs, but I think that was just for just for being an effective wildlife manager. You have to have, you have to be multifaceted. You have to be able to manage personnel. You got to have all those people skills, good communication skills to manage folks. You have to have good biological skills. The
land management, those skills that you're talking about is also part of the other leg of the stool, second leg.
Understand all the wildlife species you're managing and all the processes that you need to put on the land to support them. And then you have to have all the administrative sort of skills to be able to manage budgets and write reports and
all the fun stuff,
all the paperwork, be able to do all that well. So that's, in my mind, that's the 3 legs of the stool of somebody that's, when you look at a biologist and say, well, that's a really well-rounded biologist that can do anything and will go places. If they can supervise people, and if they can communicate really well and write well and really understand Florida wildlife and be able to manage budgets and handle all of that, I think that's just a good, well-rounded biologist.
The quintessential biologist.
The quintessential biologist.
So if you had to write a book tomorrow, what would that book look like? Or have you been thinking about a book?
I was going to write a book, actually.
Let's give a plug for your book right now. That way, you're obligated to write the book.
all I have are voice notes.
Hey, that's a great start. You get talk to text nowadays, so it's really in text form.
I guess it may never come to fruition because I just now that I'm retired, I just don't have enough time in the day to do anything.
Understood.
You always hear people say that when they retire, but it's pretty much.
I've heard that. I'm looking forward to that feeling.
Yeah, it's a good busy.
Yeah,
it's a good busy. But I was going to write a book on deer hunting, And
You've done a lot of that over the years. I remember
I've done an
deer hunting
awful lot
stories.
of deer hunting, and I've had a lot of time to think about deer hunting, sitting in a tree for like 13 hours a day, or just driving 6 hours back and forth from South Carolina.
For point of reference here, Jeff's office was lined with deer antlers. There was not 1 inch of wall space on Jeff's walls in his office. They were all deer antlers, and there was a lot more than just those. Those were just the good ones you picked out.
All big. They were all big.
Well, I remember the day. I remember we were down at, it was near Arbuckle. I can't remember the name of the property we were on. And we took a hike up on this ridge, and we were looking around and looking at some rare plants that were on this scrub ecosystem. And we came walking down this little lane, and you said, "Oh, I shot a deer right here." And I was like, "Wait, you shot a deer right here?" I said, "Yeah, I remember it. I was sitting in that tree over there, and we had just happened to walk down this little trail, and you didn't realize it till we got there right to that same spot." But part of the legacy. So, yeah, deer hunting is. I haven't done that much of it recently. I kind of, I don't know. I kind of dropped off the deer hunting thing.
Yeah.
I had a lease for a little while, but it was a very intensively managed timber property. So pretty busy. Lots of log trucks on the road.
Oh, really? Yeah. That could slow things down. Yeah, even deer hunting. I was just thinking about different ways to become a good deer hunter.
For those of our listeners who may not know, hunting is a very important part of conservation. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Hunting is what started the conservation movement back with Roosevelt, of not looking at land, like you own all the critters on it, but that's a public resource and needs to be managed as such. And that was, basically what created wildlife conservation. And it's been, the Pittman-Robertson Act. So that was an excise tax on sporting goods, firearms, ammunition, and all of that money went back to the states.
And that really helped you do your job effectively as a manager.
Yeah.
Because all those Pittman-Robertson dollars from the state of Florida, we get the license sales, gun taxes, ammunition taxes, all that comes and allowed you to be a great steward and do your job effectively and allow a lot of people to have a huge impact.
Right. That was a primary funding source for states for wildlife management. So, yeah. So while you're getting all that money and wasn't just to manage game animals, it was to manage wildlife. So
great stuff.
Yeah, hunting is the genesis of wildlife conservation pretty much in the United States.
The last question I have for you here: what 3 books would you recommend for the audience, and why?
Gosh, Cully, I don't know if I've actually read 3 books. I've read all of the Carl Hiaasen novels.
Oh, gosh.
Those catch my interest. For some reason, those just really catch my interest.
I love Carl Hiaasen.
I guess from a standpoint of humanity, there's a book by Daniel Quinn called Ishmael.
Mm-hmm.
And
I can recall that one.
I'd hate to give the storyline away there.
That's okay.
That just gives you a picture of how, as human beings, we came to be where we are now. Mm-hmm. In terms of, I guess, how we started out as hunter-gatherers and evolved to agronomists, and now we're supporting basically exceeded the carrying capacity of Earth with our agricultural practices. So from a broad view, that book was very enlightening to me. And then I guess if you dial it down a little bit, Michael Pollan's book In Defense of Food.
I haven't read that one.
That crystallizes a little bit more in America of our diets and what we're eating and how and why, and how we should be eating. And then I think probably dialing it down a little more tightly, Aldo Leopold's Sand County Almanac. I just remember reading that, and that really galvanized my career path, I guess, on just reading that book and the way he expressed thoughts that I might have about conservation and stuff. Just really,
that book
really galvanized it for me. Of like, yeah, this is me. I'm on this path, and this is where I want to go.
That's a great one. I love the it in the same. You say that it's the same story for me. I was introduced to that book in a college course, and the whole course was sort of framed around this book, and we were required to read the book. There's half the students in the class thought, "Oh, this is dry and uninteresting," but the other half said, "Wow, this is." And so it changed my view of the world too. Great books. Well, Jeff, it's been real. It's been fun, and it's also been real fun. Thank you for leading us in another step beyond the fire.